Alex, we're joined via Zoom by Wits governance expert, Professor Alex van den Heever, to weigh in on the opposition party leaders' national convention, of course, to be held on the 16th and the 17th of August. Prof. Alex, good afternoon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon.
Let's unpack the implications of these developments at this point on the back of the announcement. What are your thoughts on this pact, given the dynamics unfolding in South Africa as we edge closer to elections come 2024?
Well, it's a logical outcome of our current political arrangement and also a potential response to the facts on the ground. In other words, the need essentially for a response to a lot of failures of the current government as well. So you've got politics basically responding to societal needs. And that's what we expect in the democratic process itself. Although there are problems with the way in which the electoral system has been designed, this is currently a natural solution where you have proportional representation and the possibility that indefinitely into the future that we're going to have coalition governments. And to prevent parties from essentially pursuing individual interests to the detriment of the collective, there's a likelihood of people getting together to kind of create a strategic approach to the electoral process. So I think this is all natural and is expected, and it is a normal response to the electoral process. I think it's a very positive thing, and we're likely to see it across the board on different groupings who are of like mind, getting together to say the same things, or similar mind. They're not all of like mind.
Well, so obviously the how then becomes very important, given what was discussed today, perhaps also offering reprieve for citizens in terms of certainty for the future. How can South Africa begin to adequately prepare for coalition governance at this point of our democratic juncture?
So if we had to look at from the position of the electorate, it will be very important to understand what the different coalition groupings represent. There will be sort of two features to any issue. One is, what are their underlying sort of principles, guiding principles that are probably more universal in nature, and then the other is, what are their specific policies, and do they align with what you feel is necessary in South Africa today. So I think that the electorate needs to pay attention to what coalition governments are saying and how they're structured and how they're likely to perform. So that is an important side. The electorate basically chooses them, and therefore they need to know what they're choosing, and they shouldn't be passive, certainly at any point in a democratic system, because if you stop becoming engaged in the political process, somebody will always be in power, but you will have had no say in who that person is and who that party is. But parties essentially do need to develop a mode of engagement amongst themselves to give clarity to the electorate as well. And that, I think, is a necessary feature of the way our electoral system is organized. It might be different to the kind of a first past the post electoral system that you would have in the United Kingdom, but it is more along the lines of many of the European democratic electoral systems, which will always result in a number of different parties forming the government.
No, I agree. It sounds exciting in terms of the possibility of inclusive governance and perhaps also options for the electorate to perhaps ascertain what a better future could look like. But I mean, I need to look at the limitations and concerns as well. Ideological differences, there's issues of leadership or weak leadership, inter-party relations, emotions also come to the fore. How ready is South Africa to handle the challenges that come with coalition governments at this point, perhaps on a provincial and national, given just some of these factors?
You know, all electoral politics is problematic because what a lot of political parties attempt to do is to front-end emotional issues rather than substantive issues. And they can sway a lot of voters to support them because you align with the sort of emotional content of what somebody is saying. But that person in a position of power isn't necessarily going to act in your interests. So it is very important for the electorate to have a kind of cast a sophisticated eye on what people are actually saying and what they're likely to do, and not get affected by these sort of emotions. Now, I think that that's where the electorate is responsible, but in terms of the different coalitions, the opportunities are quite significant. There might be ideological differences, but that is part of kind of moderating what parties bring to the fore, because there's a tendency sometimes for political parties to put forward completely unrealistic proposals or stuff the leader has thought of on the sort of sitting on the toilet yesterday. That kind of policy is not very helpful to society, and very often governments themselves, as opposed to the political parties, are responsible for the refinement of policies that are put on the table. But what you do want is to have responsible leadership and very, very good leaders at the political level. And I think it's going to be very important to see whether or not the political party approaches that are going to be ones where the political party wants to have its hand in the cookie jar, or whether they're actually interested in real substantive government and governance. And I think that that is going to be probably our key deciding factor in the next set of elections. I haven't really seen, most people, unfortunately, at the electorate doesn't necessarily pay a lot of attention to nuanced policy differences. But they will have a sense of whether or not a political party and a governing party and a governing coalition is actually going to act in their interests when in a position of power and authority. And a lot of policy is not created at party policy conferences, etc. They're created through the process of governing. And in the process of governing, the government itself, that means the administrations and the parts of the system are incredibly important to supporting the development of coherent policy. And if the political leaders are in a position to lead the process of formulating coherent policy going forward using the administration of government, that's what you want out of politicians. You don't necessarily want the bright idea from last week. You want somebody who's going to show leadership in running what is in essence an incredibly complex set of institutions and in a very, very complex society. So silly ideas that you put on the table just for an election are probably never going to fly. And if you're just voting on that, you're going to probably vote for the wrong people. Vote for people who know how to run the country.
Prof, that conversation obviously leads to more questions, but we'll have to leave the conversation there for now. I want to thank you for your time.